We are going to go ahead and begin. Now it's too loud, right? We're going to go ahead and begin. Michelle Bolter will be here shortly, so we're going to just go ahead and start while she's arriving. This was a committee meeting that was called by or requested by board member Terrell Warner in order to receive feedback for R277501. So we will begin the meeting by receiving a little bit of background information from Travis Rawlings, and then we'll open the meeting up for public comment. Hopefully Michelle will be here by then.
Okay, I'm Travis Rawlings, the Educator Licensing Coordinator for the State Board of Education. I've been asked to just kind of provide a timeline and a background for the process that has led to the current rule that's before the board, R277-501. If it's too brief, I apologize. If it's not brief enough, I also apologize, so I'll do my best to balance those two things. This endeavor started in August of 2016. And when the board created the APT program, and there was a lot of feedback, and the board decided to establish a task force to examine all aspects of licensing. So instead of tinkering here and there with licensing, the idea was to examine licensing as a whole. So a task force was created. They met a few times in that fall. Then they also started meeting with stakeholders, HR, superintendents, university personnel. There were several meetings scheduled, and people came in and had discussions, and it led to the core idea of what R277-501 is talking about, and that is simplifying licensing to three types of licenses. The idea that there's an associate license that's for a person who is becoming a professional teacher, a professional license for the person who's met all the requirements, and an LEA-specific license for those unique circumstances where it's necessary. So that kind of came out of that task force in the summer of 2017. Emily Wheeler, myself, and Diana Sudreth, all who work for the board, went out and did a number of focus groups with, again, teachers, district personnel, superintendents, HR again, teacher leader groups, all kinds of, and we presented to the board, to the task force in August about the results of that information. And then the board, the task force made a final recommendation to the board in September of 2017 to direct staff to move forward with the creation and development of a three-tiered licensing system, again focusing on the three general ideas: associate, professional, LEA specific. And as that would require statutory change, staff was working with stakeholders to draft rules at the same time that we were working with legislators to draft legislation to allow the board to make these changes. Ultimately, in this past fall, we've met with several groups. In November of 2017, we met with 4 or 5 groups, I believe, with, again, doing focus groups, gathering information. And then we ended up with a draft of 501 first in January of 2018. It has, again, it was put out to stakeholders in both writing and in public board meetings. We got a lot of feedback. We incorporated a lot of it. We got feedback from board members that we incorporated. There are some things that, one thing that we've learned as we've created this draft, one of the things we've learned is we don't know that there's a perfect system. That over working for 18 months on this, there is no system that the board could create that would make everyone happy. I just don't think that's possible from my expertise and experience. But we are to now where we are. We have R277-501 with draft 4, which passed through this committee in the March board meeting, and will be going before the board, full board tomorrow. And the committee again asked to gather more public input, and it will be up to the board members if they choose to make any motions to alter the rule as it currently stands. So that's my preparation, or my presentation.
All right, so let me...
That was really good timing.
Yes, that was. So 14
She's
times...
great.
14 times 3 is 42 minutes, so there's 14, 3 might
I can talk more if you need.
No, we're just... Yeah, so... So 14, so you wanted to give him 3 minutes. that might be good.
Okay, thank you, Travis.
Do you want me to stay or do you want me to go?
It's up to you.
Yeah,
It's up to you.
I would probably stay.
Okay, then I will do so.
Okay, so it looks like we have about 14 people signed up for public comment. So we're going to go ahead and give 3 minutes of time per person. So as your name is called, just come up and make sure that you state your name and who you represent. And then watch the time. Do we have a time card?
Sybil will be
Okay.
taking time. Do you have a time card? Time's up? I can grab it.
Do you have
Okay.
a rock?
We'll do like a 1 minute.
Lorraine has one. She'll be bringing
When
a
you have
sign.
1 minute, and so that way you can kind of start wrapping up. And then after the public comment, then the time will be turned over to the committee to discuss and decide if there will be any action that we will take based on the comment. So thank you all for coming. And
Yeah. So if you
okay,
go ahead and go.
we'll start with Sarah Jones,
And say who's on deck so they're ready.
and then Stephen Phelps will be on deck.
That was not good. Yes.
Thank you for scheduling this meeting. I think the turnout indicates there's still a lot of feedback that wants to be shared. I actually have
Can you-
remarks.
can you
I'm
state your
sorry.
name
Thank you.
and
Sarah
who you are?
Jones with
Sorry.
the Utah Education Association.
Thank you.
My comments would take over 3 minutes, so I'm going to try to just identify some of the most maybe significant issues I think the rule still needs to address. And all of my comments, I would say, come down to the precision of language. And there's a lot of areas where the language is still vague enough that we certainly have concerns, and I think others have concerns about how this rule would actually be implemented. So I'm going to jump right to the the LEA-specific license areas. We do have some comments that I can share with you via email on the associate license. But on the LEA-specific license, so lines 324, it says, this is about the renewal process for the LEA-specific license. The first renewal of this license shall be approved by the board. Is this intended to indicate that the first renewal be brought to the board for their consideration and may not be approved? Or is it intended that the board shall renew every LEA-specific license and is not allowed to consider whether it should be renewed? That language is not clear. Lines 326 to 327 says the board may require future renewals on a case-by-case basis. To me, I think this really implies that subsequent renewals can be done at the LEA level, which implies it's a permanent license. It doesn't have to come to the board anymore. And so if you're creating this permanent license, you're really circumventing the goal that I've heard the board talk about, and we want everybody at the professional educator standards. And a permanent renewal of the LEA-specific license, we think, is the wrong direction to go, and say that the LEA-specific license really should be time-limited, similar to the associate educator license, such as a 3-year process. Lines 364 to 367 say that you require a trained mentor and mentoring plan for associate or LEA-specific licenses. But if there is this permanent renewal of the LEA-specific license, does that mean they permanently have a mentor? I think LEA is expected to provide that. So these are the kind of specifics we're talking about with the intent of the language. But let me jump to something, because I've already been given the 1-minute signal, something that's really much more substantive. And this is the new language about terminating the license, which we see as a real concern. On lines 328 to 331, it's in green font, and then on lines 383 to 387, also in green font. So 328, there's a term used that's really not a term we're familiar with, at least, saying that the superintendent can terminate the license, the LEA-specific license. Is that the same as revocation? It's not defined, so are the consequences of a termination of an LEA-specific license the same or different? What standard is used? So my 3 minutes are up. Can I continue on this point? Sure.
Just 1 more minute.
Okay. So these are really critical issues because we're talking about due process standards here and property rights of a license. And we feel like the rule is not clear at all on what the property rights are and the due process rights are for the LEA specific license. So you can terminate, that's a definition that's not defined. When you terminate the license, can they ever receive another license? Does that permanently bar them from ever having another license, like a revocation? What exactly is the intention there? The license is a property right, and the board is granting the license even though the LEA is requesting it. The board is granting the license, the board is terminating the license, and there's no clarity at all what the standards are for either granting or terminating that license. And I think these are significant issues to clarify. The board has to have a process where the license holder, where the educator is afforded due process before a property right is removed. And whether that's termination or revocation, what does that look like? So it's line 328 to 330, and then also lines 383 to 387. It says that the LEA will develop criteria and procedures if they want to request an early termination. Okay, well, 53G-11-513 talk about provisional status and career status. We don't believe these would be at-will employees, and there are due process provisions that are already in code. How does the LEA specific license interact with those? So we can certainly share with you the detail of other specific language that are kind of smaller points that we think would make the rule much clearer. But these sections on what this LEA specific license is, how it's granted, how it's terminated, what that means, what the rights are for the educator who holds the license, how that interacts with the LEA, those are very significant issues that we feel this is not clear enough to move this rule forward at this point in time. So I'll just conclude there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll have Stephen Phelps come up, and then Melanie Agnew, Lisa DeFrance, and Stan Howard. You three will be on deck.
My name is Steve Phelps. I'm a Utah Hope Street Group Fellow. I'm also an inclusion advocate for students with disabilities and a father of 2 kids with disabilities of my own. There are some very concerning very concerning problems with this, the LA specific licensure being one of them. I couldn't determine if there was any minimum standard for a teacher to be qualified. It basically was the LEA could pick whatever standard they chose, and it could be whatever they chose, right? As a teacher who worked in the charter school for 3.5 years, the boards of those charter schools do not provide adequate oversight. I've seen them reduce education minutes for students in mathematics below the standard student in the regular high school, in a school that had 85% of kids with disabilities. And they said that was the right move for the students' decision purposes. There's no way they could have justified that. I pointed out to them that there were some legality issues. To me, my biggest concern is the LEA, the way it's structured currently, the LEA license has no oversight. The way the language reads is they get a license for up to 3 years, they get an automatic renewal for up to 3 more. So that means there's 6 years before the Utah State Board, who has the responsibility for licensing, can step in and even say, this person isn't qualified, if I read the language correctly. That hurts students with disabilities in particular. A lot of students with disabilities do seek out charter schools and other ways to do it. Now we're putting them in front of teachers who aren't qualified, who don't understand the IEP process, and we're asking them to fully handle legalities and the nuances of that process. It's going to affect the inclusion movement. It's going to affect those students disproportionately. In addition to that, the change in the wording on the basic law component of special education under the associate license is also concerning. I think anytime we start dealing with some of those groups that have federal protections, if teachers are not adequately prepared, it will result in unintended consequences and possible lawsuits. So I think the board has the responsibility to ensure all students receive an equitable education. That means every student has a qualified teacher in front of them, regardless. So that's what I would have to say on that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead.
Sorry, could you clarify again just that last thing you said, something to do with the associate license?
So in the most recent draft of the associate license, it restructured the special ed component to just a basic law class of special education law, not actually the real life, how do you implement this in the classroom. So you're asking a teacher somebody who's never been a teacher before to walk in, and say, here's a handful of students who have a disability, and they don't really, they understand the legal implications, but not the practical implications in the classroom. So.
Thank you. Melanie Agnew.
Thank you. I will do my best to keep my comments to 3 minutes.
Make sure you state your name.
Sorry. My name is Melanie Agnew, and I speak on behalf of myself today. My comments are informed by my position as a faculty member and dean of an educator prep program. I just really appreciate the comments also of the last two speakers. So I often find myself in conversations with graduates of our programs, and the stories that I often hear are deep concern for student learning. So I wanted to share a compelling story I recently heard last week from a graduate, because I think it helps to explain the implications of licensing structures, and especially that the structures that grant licenses to underprepared teachers. And this one case, I believe, echoes a pattern of concerns from graduates. So first, I do understand that the APT and the ARL would no longer exist in the proposed structure. Further, while modules will likely be a part of the new licensing structure, they are not yet defined, and they too are likely to fall short of the level of rigor that is needed in teacher preparation for today's classrooms. So this brings me to the story of the graduate. So last year, her school hired 7 teachers licensed through alternative pathways. 6 of the 7 did not return, or 86%. If each teacher had 25 students, that means 150 students' educations were likely put at risk, and this is only one school in 1 year. This year, the same school administration hired 3 instructional coaches to help mentor underrepresented teachers. So I was told that the funding for the coaches could have been used to reduce the class size. Instead, the 4th grade classes will now have 30 students in them. Underprepared teachers create serious budgetary, human resource, teacher morale, instructional quality, equity, and school climate implications. For example, triage level mentoring is aimed at survival rather than providing rich professional development for teachers. Teacher turnover is costly in terms of recruitment, hiring, retention, mentoring, and school climate. And then our research shows that underprepared teachers are most concentrated in Title I schools, where most of Utah's most vulnerable populations, students, depend on high-quality teachers. So 4 immediate possible solutions come to mind. Differentiation in the licensing structure that requires those teachers holding the primary responsibility for students' education, so elementary teachers and secondary core subjects, to demonstrate the 10 Utah effective teaching standards before being granted any license. 2, emergency licenses with requirements as stated for the associate and LEA specific licenses for hard-to-fill classrooms as a response to the teacher shortage. This license should be in effect until the teaching license addresses the root level causes that create the teacher shortage in the first place. 3, to put percentage caps on LEA specific and associate licenses per LEA. 4, create scholarships for teachers to attend high-quality teacher prep programs. Those are my suggestions, and thank you for listening for all of your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, Lisa DeFrance. I don't know if I'm saying these names right.
So I'm Lisa DeFrance, and I am a parent of a 14-year-old in the district, Salt Lake District, and I'm also representing myself as an educator in a Title I Salt Lake District school. And I came to teaching as this is my second profession, and when I decided to change, I went through Westminster's MET program, and that was a 1-year program, and I felt like I was as prepared as I could be, but it was still a struggle given that I was working in a Title I situation and under school improvement. But the story I really want to tell is the story of my daughter, who is heading to high school next year. She's 14 years old and she's going to the IB program at West. So her first 2 years she went to a district-sponsored charter school, and she had, that was preschool, very highly qualified, amazing preschool instructor. And I want you to know I loved this school. We loved this school. Her kindergarten year, she had a first-year teacher. Her second year, she had a first-year teacher. And her third year, she had a teacher who was alternative route to licensure, who had been teaching 4th grade and had decided to job share with a 2nd grade teacher. So her ARL training was in a 4th grade classroom with a 4th grade mentor, knowing the developmental needs of a 4th grade student. So by the time my daughter finished 2nd grade, she could not read. And it was upon her dad and I to get her, pay for, transport her to one-on-one tutoring to learn how to read. This is a girl who's going to the IB West program. This is a girl who fell through the cracks. And I just have really deep concerns about putting people in the classroom that aren't highly qualified, because my family had the resources and the wherewithal to catch what was going on because I was in a teacher prep program at the time. I think about the kids that I teach who are immigrants, refugees, students of color. They are struggling to understand the way school works, the way our culture works, and if you don't have a kid reading by the 3rd grade, you can pretty much count on a struggle for the rest of their school career. So I'm advocating that we give every student access to highly qualified teachers and figure out other ways that if we want to address the teacher shortage, that we pilot programs, that we get evidence that shows that teachers coming in as a 2nd career are able to function in a highly qualified way with students. And just it feels like there's not enough evidence to support this change. Thank you.
Thank you. Stan Howard.
You can take my name off.
Okay. Francine Johnson.
Same with me. My concerns have been addressed.
They've been addressed. Okay. Heidi Matthews.
And you might want to say Deidre Straight.
And then Deidre Straight is on deck.
Thank you. I'm Heidi Matthews. I'm the president of the Utah Education Association. I'm going to just bring this discussion back to more of a vision, and I appreciate your willingness to listen to stakeholder input on this important rule, as it really sets the foundation for moving forward in this licensing system. I know it feels like we've been talking about licensing forever, and yes, you shared the conceptual ideas, the different buckets, and for over a year and a half, but it is important to note that the detailed language for this rule has only been available for us to study in the last months. Now, one of our main roles at the UEA is to diligently uphold the teaching profession and to insist that licensing systems are in place to elevate the profession and help teachers to be successful so students can be successful. And this is the spirit that I come to you today. Many of the questions and concerns Dr. Sarah Jones has already addressed. My question to you is about the vision of the Utah State Board of Education. Does the board as a whole share a vision of what excellent teaching looks like? And how does this licensing system serve to promote excellence in the classroom? It certainly streamlines the many pathways to licensure that have been created, but in what ways, other than simplifying, is this better? It's very difficult to see excellent teaching supported in the 3 pathways to licensure because these pathways do not all include components that lead to the same goal, particularly with the many apparently to be determined unknowns of the LEA-specific license. have a much easier time supporting the direction of the licensing rules if you could articulate how these changes are going to improve teaching and learning in Utah and address the shortage of people entering our classrooms. My fear is that in this process is missing a key component, this goal of excellence in our classroom. This process just moves forward on the stated timeline. It will memorialize a licensing structure that allows good-hearted but untrained and inexperienced people into our classroom as the teacher of record from day one. Yes, we need to streamline, and yes, there needs to be flexibilities for districts to hire right now in this time of need. But solidifying this structure and this rule will not move us forward. Give us a vision of how in 5 years only professionally licensed teachers will be in the classroom as the teacher of record, and how this licensing structure is going to assure the professional credibility of a license to teach in Utah. Thank you.
Thank you. Oops. Thank you. And then Sean Christiansen is on deck.
Hi, my name is Deirdre Strait. I'm a parent and a parent volunteer at Highland High School. I have 3 children. My oldest graduated last year from Highland High School. He was one of the valedictorians. He was the only boy. He graduated with a IB diploma as well, was involved in, as the editor-in-chief of The Rambler, and was highly active in student government and soccer. I have 2 other children. I've got a junior who's in the IB program as well. I've got a daughter who is a sophomore and who's pursuing AP and honors coursework. I say that we're a family who knows how to negotiate school. We look for programs like extended learning, can research into IB programs and so on and so forth, and it's really paid off, and we really appreciate the value of excellently well-prepared teachers. My oldest son did get an early decision to Duke University, and he'll be doing that after he returns back from his LDS mission. I personally have been involved as a co-oping parent in extended learning programs. I've been a long-term and a short-term substitute teacher, and in fact I did do long-term substitution at the invitation of our principal because, one, I was interested in maybe pursuing teaching as a career and would have had to do it sort of as a second career, change of pathway. She encouraged me to apply for a position, actually, that was opening up in the school, and I would have had to pursue an alternate route to licensure program at the time. I really considered it long and hard, but I felt with young children it would have been hard to juggle the family, also pursue the alternate route to licensure and teach full-time in a way that I really would have liked to. I ended up developing and then running a hands-on science program at Beacon Heights. And I say that, and I'm also involved in a lot of other ways currently with English language learners at Highland High School. I thought I would be just volunteering in the classroom, helping to support the students and the teachers, but have noticed that there are some systems issues and preparation issues, to be quite honest, with regard to English language learners. And so I come to you kind of with a unique experience as a parent who has spent quite a bit of time in the classroom, both as an educator, temporary, unlicensed, someone for whom alternate routes to licensure and these new licensing pathways are things I would actually consider. But what I've learned in all of my experience since that time, as a long-term substitute and as a hands-on science instructor, and through the course of a lot of personal study on issues of equity, issues of best practices for English language learners and special ed students, I know that on day one, if I had pursued that alternate route to licensure and had started teaching, even with a practice of teaching that was well received by parents and by the administrator, I would not have been sufficiently prepared for the students in my class. I would not have known about special ed issues. I would not have learned about English language issues and the myriad of issues that are involved with English language learners. We have second-generation students who are still in language services. We've got students who are newcomers who have had limited and interrupted formal education, who've been in refugee camps. We've had all sorts of issues, and I see that now even with excellent teachers are underprepared. And so I would just encourage everybody to really look at this as the equity issue that it is. And I don't think my kids would have worried, but I worry about kids who are in rural areas, also students of color, students in poverty, language learners, and other students that have barriers and challenges to student achievement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean Christiansen.
Yeah, Sean Christiansen. And then Terry Shoemaker, you're on deck.
Sean Christiansen, I represent myself, that come from my comments from experience as a faculty member and as a dean. In my experience, the standards when there are multiple pathways are not consistent across programs. Not necessarily in traditional programs. I would send my kid to any program in the state. They're all equally high quality. But when there are multiple pathways, the standards are often not consistent in those multiple pathways. And I know my own experience in our program that we are losing students who will get the content degree and then go alternate pathway because it's a quicker path, even though they're not getting the same experience and quality. If you look at other licensure programs in social work, law, accounting, and so forth, there's one pathway. And with that pathway, we know there's high quality. With that high quality, we then treat those individuals as professionals. And it seems to me with multiple pathways, what happens is then the legislature assumes that we need to regulate quality, so then we legislate more. As we legislate more, creative, high-quality teachers get into a profession that is not consistent with their passions of being teachers, and we drive teachers out, which creates a need for more teachers, so we create pathways that are easier for teachers to go through, and then we kind of get in this problem where we just get this circular system that keeps creating the problem. My philosophy is I think we have it backwards, that we need to go the other way around and expect the highest standards of teacher. We only allow the best teachers to be in the program, and then we get out of the way of teachers because they are professionals and let them do what they're good at. That's to inspire, it's to create, it's to motivate, and to teach. If you look at Finland, we often assume that within Finland, their programs are so great because teachers are paid a lot, and that's not the case. Teachers in Finland are not paid how you would expect in terms of maybe comparable to doctors or lawyers. They're paid a pretty modest amount, but it takes us 6 years to get through a program. They're highly respected. It's very difficult to become a teacher. It's a very competitive process. They have high status in Finland, and within that, because they are respected, they are passionate about what they do because of the creativity and the impact they make on their students. So in general, I think we kind of have this backwards. I think we're creating more of a problem by creating all these alternative pathways, and I understand flexibility, but I think we need to go the other way around and create the highest standards, respect teachers. Yeah, pay would have something to do with that, but I know many teachers are leaving the profession not because of pay, but because the passions that they have are teaching, they're not able to do that because of some of the challenges with regulation and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry Shoemaker. And then Aaron Popham is on deck.
Good afternoon, Terry Shoemaker. I'm in my 39th year. I've been an elementary classroom teacher, a principal, a curriculum specialist, a HR specialist for Provo School District, the director for that, superintendent of schools for 15 years. I was on the board of trustees at Utah Valley University for 8 years. I served on the governing board with BYU Public School Partnership for 8 or more. Probably actually all 15 years of when I was superintendent. The conversation that's missing in all that I've heard so far is the side of the employer. So I represent the School Boards Association and the Superintendents Association. I don't disagree with all of the discussion about what leads to a higher quality teacher. All of our superintendents feel, all of them feel, if we could have them come through the traditional programs that we've currently had, that's what we'd like to do. But the current realities of teacher shortage don't allow us to do that. that's still an important factor. If I've got to put a teacher in a 5th grade classroom and I don't have one and I can't find one, and we actually have elementary shortage, teachers who are elementary licensed, shortages across this state, where we've had to actually have people have alternative licensures in those programs. I thought that day would never come, but it's come here in Utah in certain places. What is here in Salt Lake City and in Utah County is not what exists in Daggett County and in Beaver County and in Garfield County and all throughout this state. So I would like to suggest that the flexibility associated with what has been, it was so flexible and so convoluted, it's actually nice that it's been labeled now back to 3 programs. That's helped the employers. The specific program, the district-specific program that could be used, we were using that already. We called it ARL, APT. We were doing it for years and years and years and years to fill particular teaching positions. What this does is it allows the school board and a school superintendent to control it more directly. It actually gives them the flexibility that they need. It allows them to start and stop when it needs to happen. None of the superintendents feel that's where they would ultimately like to be. They would ultimately like to be, that's been suggested, with the traditional program, how we've created and trained teachers and mentored teachers in the past. We can do this that way. We want to do it that way. But in the meantime, let's not forget we're in the midst of a teacher shortage. And it's the school boards that hire these folks. Yes, the state board licenses them. But in the end, it's the school boards and superintendents and the principals that have to manage it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I yield my time. Thank you.
Okay.
It's Nick Hansen, I guess.
Nick Hansen?
Or is that Aaron Poppin?
That was Aaron Poppin,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Nick Hansen?
That's me.
Okay. And then Cindy Phillips, she'll be on deck.
Everybody, thanks for seeking input and whatnot. I came to this meeting just to learn and to gather information. I didn't come prepared to share anything or complaints, but my name is Nick Hansen, and I work in the Human Resource Department for Jordan School District. And so I guess I echo the comments of the previous gentleman that I agree with and sympathize with the plight of many that have been shared today, that having someone that has not gone through a teacher preparation program can put students at a disadvantage. From my perspective as a school administrator, I also have seen the opposite, where some people have the disposition and the character traits to be very successful in a classroom. Not everyone can do it, but there are those that have the dispositions to be successful in the classroom, and having alternate pathways affords them the opportunity. And it's kind of, it would be ideal if teachers were, educators were paid more. There would be an increased demand for people coming into the profession. But in our current state of affairs, there's a little bit of a scarcity mentality, where you have a real demand, a real need to fill, and you need teachers. You need someone to, and principals are interviewing and doing the very best they can to find the right person, the best candidate, and these alternate pathways afford them that opportunity. And the associate professional and LEA specific license clarifies and simplifies the many different regulations and requirements for APT and ARL, and what works and what doesn't. So I appreciate that. I guess my only question, and perhaps you could direct me to where I could find the answer, or if the answer doesn't exist, it's just something to consider. Though there are pathways for people to come into the profession, once people are in the profession, my experience has taught me that it's very difficult for people to move laterally in different levels. For example, a second grade teacher who has an elementary license, a K-3 license, wants to teach 4th grade. The administration wants them to teach 4th grade, but there's currently not a simple process for someone to pass the pedagogy, the teaching skill set to move levels without going and getting a master's degree and getting a K-6 license. So that's a challenge. Someone that is teaching, I don't know, perhaps history, and they want to teach geography. In order to get endorsed, there are a lot of university courses that are required to be taken in order to get that endorsement, that ability to teach that area. My thought process tends to think it would be nice if there was some sort of a practice, some sort of an assessment that could be taken and passed that demonstrates you have what it takes. And if you can't pass that, then you have to do all the other, take the additional courses and requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And then Cindy Phillips.
First, I want to start by saying how much I appreciate the effort that you've gone through, Travis in particular, and the team, to meet the disparate and varied needs in establishing statute and board rule that would put in structure licensure that reflects the actual many and varied scenarios that LEAs see and manage. I come to this discussion, although I'm a member of the State Charter School Board and UPAC, and I come as the Executive Director of the Wyoming School, so I only speak for myself, and also a teacher of 33 years, a secondary teacher, and an administrator of over 20 years. And I want to suggest that there is a place to provide for some customization and some differentiation for teacher licensure. I perhaps have more confidence in this kind of a system than others, and confidence in individual LEAs to actually carry out a measure of rigor if they want to have good teachers at their LEA. And perhaps that's because for about 24 years of my career, I taught in private school, about a decade now in public school. I myself went through an alternative route for licensure, and I appreciated that it was there and would have appreciated even more flexibility at the time, given my experience at that point. And in that private school, I've seen a model that works, wherein teachers with excessive even and extensive preparation and content who are then mentored for at least 3 years by very good teachers, in fact become good teachers or they're let go. And that kind of a model does make certain assumptions about content preparation and then significant mentoring for pedagogy. So I would like to suggest that as part of the LEA-specific license, which doesn't seem to have minimum standards at this time, and kind of mimics the old letter of authorization, that the board consider some requirements. Maybe these could be different from, but similar to, the APT requirements that at least required demonstration of content knowledge with praxis tests, and then an LEA-specific plan for 3 years of mentoring that aligned with state-required mentoring standards, and then required at the end of those 3 years that praxis 2 related to pedagogy and practicum, and along with the obvious and simple LEA approval that is formal. I would also, I feel like that allows for the flexibility for those teachers who might come from a non-traditional path but do have extensive experience in one way or another, coaching, perhaps teaching in other systems or in other states. I do like that there's that flexibility, but I do like having gates that require demonstration of at least content and eventually pedagogy. I would also like to suggest that I'm unclear, and so would just ask for clarification on the associate license. I noticed that, in fact, a person holding a professional license can receive an associate license in an endorsable area. I'm wondering then if that becomes an alternative endorsement path. And perhaps I just read that wrong. I just asked for a clarification on that so that as an employer, as Superintendent Shoemaker suggested, that's the position I'm coming from too, so I like having this flexibility. An example, I hired a couple of years ago an extremely talented teacher, I'll just finish this thought, who was currently in a traditional teacher licensing program and had been a very successful paraprofessional in special education prior to that for several years. So she'd actually been in education for 5 years and was currently in a traditional program. I was able to ask for letters of authorization for her as she finished her bachelor's degree, and instead of finishing it right away, she rolled over into her master's degree. She's up at the University of Utah, and we ran out of letters of authorization for the coming year, so I had planned on giving, requesting from the board an LEA, a site-specific license. And this is an exact example of someone who is not only good at what she does and has had enough experience for me to have confidence, although she's received mentoring, but that allows me to make sure that she is licensed by the State Board of Education while she finishes an advanced degree now in elementary ed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Was there anyone else that wanted to give public comment that did not have a chance to sign up? Okay, and then, did you want to give public comment?
Yeah. Is that the time right now?
Yes.
Okay.
And state your name, and then you have 3 minutes in civil. And then, yes, who you represent.
My name is John Arthur. I'm a 6th grade teacher here at Meadowlark Elementary in Salt Lake. I'm really here to represent myself as a dad in the state of Utah as well as a teacher. And honestly, I hate that I just missed the previous comments. We were just at a baby shower at our school, so I hope you'll forgive us. It's a common thing. You know, going over the changes in the policy, I'm not as versed as everybody else, but as a fairly new dad, I have a 2-year-old and then a 2-month-old. I fear what's going to happen for my daughters when they go to school. We just moved out to Bluffdale. It's a growing population, growing community, and I'm afraid that my daughters might end up in a class with a teacher who's unprepared, underqualified for the role of educating them as they go through whatever academic year that is. Before I became a teacher, I was a waiter for many years here in the state of Utah, and it strikes me that you couldn't even get a job serving tables without first having shadowed somebody who's more experienced in that position. I couldn't even walk up to a table and take somebody's order for their dinner without having first gone through some sort of a program of being introduced into that profession and that specific organization, and had experience while watching someone who's more proficient. The idea that somebody could walk into a classroom and teach without having first student taught, gone through a methods program, through a university, everything else, terrifies me. And I think that as a proud Utahn, it's bad for our brand, it's bad for business. If that's something that we're going to say is okay for educators in the state of Utah. It's already been that way, I know, through previous policies. I've always thought it was a bad idea. And if this is a time where we're looking at policies and making changes, I think there's a different direction that we could go in, at the very least. And again, as a teacher, I know I'm in agreement with a lot of people in this room who say, obviously, I went through a traditional program. I hold 2 master's degrees to do what I do. I'm highly qualified, and I think that's a requirement. I think it's something that everyone should be held to. I feel like teaching is this beautiful mountain range in the distance. In order to help kids climb that mountain range, climb those mountains, you have to first walk the path and practice on the little hills on the way. And then once you get to that mountain range, you are then prepared to take the 30 kids that are waiting for you there up that mountain. And if you skip the path to get there, you're going to be unprepared to do that job. Somebody who knows the mountain, who knows the content, they may be ready to climb, but they're not ready to lead a classroom full of kids on that same journey. There has to be some sort of way where you could put into place some sort of on-the-job experience before you get in there. Whether it's partnering with schools during summer school or whatever else. I honor anybody who chooses to go into teaching, and I want them to be as successful as possible. So please, put into place something that will let them do that. Some sort of summer institute, something. But make it a requirement that they teach before they become teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that wanted?
Add on to my previous comment.
Yes.
So, excuse me. First, I do want to thank you for simplifying the process. My name is Steve
restate
Phelps.
your name. Thank you.
I'm going to talk as a father right now, not as a teacher or teacher leader. First of all, I want to thank Travis for his amazing work. This is not an easy. It's not an easy thing to take on. I mean, it's a very complex issue. But I'm going to share a fairly personal story. I may wind up in tears. So my son was in second grade. He was placed into a classroom ARL teacher. At the time, we didn't realize he had autism. The teacher couldn't interact with him, didn't understand how to manage a classroom, instead put him down and insulted him. By the end of that year, we stuck him in the hospital because he couldn't handle it anymore. He was suicidal. And when he opened up about it just last year, he explained what the teacher was doing. He explained how the teacher would insult him and put him down and ridicule. This wouldn't happen if that teacher was qualified. This isn't just about students and their learning. This is also about students and their emotional health. There's a certain level of being a human being that requires a teacher, and how to craft that message to a student that says you care and that you matter. You know, that message is something that professional teachers have really worked hard to craft. And that's the most important part of what makes somebody successful. That's what makes somebody be able to take a student and say, you know what? Maybe you haven't been successful the last 10 years of school. But today's a new day, right? It's what I do every day with my students. It's what most teachers of students do. But the fact is, if we gamble with teachers, and there are ARL teachers who have been magnificent, I will definitely buy that. And I think the ARL has a place. I think there seems to be some confusion about which is the replacement for the ARL licensing, if that's the associate license, as I understand it, or the specific one. But when we give people a chance to define whatever they mean for a minimum standard, we're gambling with kids' lives, okay? When I taught, my second year I taught it, I was a teacher. We had 3 students dying a month. 3 students committed suicide in a month. Worst year of my life, okay? It goes so much further than just simply the education of the student when we're talking about teachers. I recently worked with the same group of students for 3.5 years. My wife was like, you love those kids more than our kids sometimes. And I said, well, I spent more time with them than I have mine. And that was the truth. I really, over the last 3.5 years, have spent more time with those students than mine. The impact a teacher has on not just the education, but also the emotional stability of the student can't be gambled with. And we must reflect that in our standards. Our standards must be kept high. In addressing the teacher shortage, we cannot, absolutely not, lower the standard. By lowering the standard, we're not addressing the teacher shortage. What happens when you put an underqualified teacher in a school is every other teacher that's capable in that school has to pick up the slack. And all of a sudden, they're like, well, now I'm working 80 hours a week. Why am I going to be a teacher? You know, many teachers have thought that. I thought that up until I started this year. So I think that we have to be careful, not only for the sake of addressing the teacher shortage, but protecting the standard of teaching and the mental health of our students. It's an absolutely vital thing. So, thank you.
Thank you. And then, yes, and then after, what's your name?
Melissa Sean Mitchell.
Okay, after Melissa, in your 3 minutes, Sarah, if you wanted to finish your thoughts, I could give you an additional 3 minutes to do so. Thank you.
My name is Melissa Sean Mitchell. I am also an administrator at Wildman School of Discovery. I'm an educator elementary, 1st through 8th grade, I'm certified to teach. I've taught for 10 years, and I am a board chair for the Center for Creativity, Innovation, and Discovery that just opened in Cache Valley. At Wildman, one of our apt candidates, I have to read my notes because this is, I don't mind being in front of little kids, but this whole thing just throws my brain off. We have an apt candidate who, at Weileman, the protocol for having a teacher like that is to have them with a mentor teacher for at least 1 year where they're kind of co-teaching. So it's student teaching, but under a teacher in possibly 2 years, and then additional coursework that we see as needed specifically with special education. While I feel that I had personally one of the better experiences to become a teacher, I did a traditional certification through Utah State University, but I was able to do a internship for my first year of teaching, where I co-taught with a teacher as I entered into my master's degree. It was great, and I wish all of our certifications and licensing could handle that, because someone who takes over a classroom, you have no idea what it's like until you're there. But as it's been said before, we have a shortage right now, and we have a budget that is only so big. I just hope that with the board taking these things into consideration, that there are different ways to have teachers in a classroom, but they do need to have experience with students before they are, I want to say, let loose. Because with all of the restrictions and thank you, and requirements that are being placed on teachers, we're up against things that it's not in a textbook, it's not on an online program. It's, these students are real, and when you can read about anything, you can watch videos, but when they're in your class all day long, trying to help them with needs that you're unaware of. We have students right now that are in foster care. I've worked with students who are homeless. We have students whose parents are going through challenges that trickle down into their behavior in the classroom. And without new teachers having some type of mentoring program through the requirements that you're about to put into place, we want to make sure that they are, they need to be raised to a level where they can be successful and therefore help students be successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Jones.
Sarah Jones with UEA. I appreciate you being given a little extra time. Thank you for that. So just, as I had said before, I think the termination issue, the due process, all of that, we don't have specific language to offer at this moment, but I could perhaps talk with Angie afterwards, or we really think that those are critical issues. And the status of the LEA specific, is that a permanent license or not? Because a letter of authorization was not permanent. So a couple of things on the associate license that we think would clarify and improve. On line 225, it talks about professional learning modules before they're licensed. Modules, I think, implies brief, cursory, introductory, part of something bigger. Doesn't talk about it, doesn't really imply substantive learning. And so we recommend that that really be replaced with the word course. A course does not have to be a semester like in a teacher preparation program, but a course would be something that's more substantive and thorough in preparing this person to be licensed. In line 225 to 229, it outlines the pedagogical requirements for the associate license. Nothing is stated about the Utah Effective Teaching Standards, but in your own board rule 530, the teaching standards have been adopted as an expectation for licensure. So I think that on line 229, you need to have that there will be understanding of the Utah, how to meet the Utah Effective Teaching Standards before the associate license is granted.
Sorry, Sarah, 229?
225 to 229 lays out the, and this was confusing as well because the word pedagogical was struck from there and it said additional requirements. But on lines 166, it says there will be pedagogical requirements for each license, so I don't understand why pedagogical was struck there. But it lists ethics, class management, special education law.
Ethics, the law, because that's not pedagogical.
Oh, I see.
That's why.
Okay, I see. So we really encourage you to add a requirement after special education law or before it goes on knowing the Utah Effective Teaching Standards, that's how teachers are evaluated. That's going to be how they're teaching, how they're instructing. It's what our preparation programs are doing. That's the expectation. And they should know that before they're licensed as well. Jumping to lines 240 to 243. On line 240 to 243, it says that an LEA who employs an associate educator, licensed person, develops a personalized learning plan. We think that should also include language in that personalized learning plan and identify available resources. Identify available resources for them to support their learning. It's not just about here's what you should do and figure out how to do it. So we would say on line 241, develop a personalized professional learning plan and identify available resources to support the educator. A couple of other thoughts. This is a point of clarification. On that same page, line 245, this personalized learning plan, it says, line 245, shall consider previous education experience and previous preparation and a formal discussion and observation process. And I'm guessing you don't mean that the plan should consider a formal discussion and observation, but should include. I'm hoping a formal discussion and observation, so I think that's a language clarification. The plan considers their previous preparation, considers their previous experience, and requires that they be observed and have a conversation with their administrator on that. And one other on the LEA-specific license that would provide clarification on lines 388 to 397. You're requiring that an LEA adopt policy about who they hire on this LEA-specific license. And then on lines 389, say that they should post information on their website about hiring on this LEA-specific license. Because you're requiring them to adopt policy, I think in the spirit of transparency, that in all of the information you're requiring be posted, disclosure of who they're employing under this license, the types of license, FTEs and so on, in lines 392 and 94, that you also ask the school to link to the actual policy adopted by the LEA so that a parent can see what were the criteria by which my LEA decided to license that person. You require them to adopt the policy, but nowhere is it required to make public what the policy is that the LEA determined. So those are some of the specifics we think would clarify, but again I would come back to, we do really have some significant concerns on 328 to 330 and 383 to 387, and the intention on the granting of the license and the termination of the license, how that works. So thank you very much for the additional time.
Thank you. What?
Can I make a follow-up comment to something Sarah said?
Yes.
Just from an employee's point of view.
Just as a follow-up to Sarah Jones' comments, on the LEA license termination and so on, reference lines 383 to 387 and 328 to 331. In essence, if I fail to renew or terminate that employee who holds an LEA-specific license, that license would de facto become inactive. And only when I hired that person again and asked for that, or another LEA picked that individual up and then issued their own LEA license, would it become active. And so I am hesitant for, I would avoid the use of anything like revocation or termination, because in essence that becomes just inactive. But it isn't that the property disappears per se, it's just that you can only use it at one LEA that doesn't want to hire you anymore. So that's probably, those are some sticky items, and I just wanted, from an employer's point of view, if I'm getting somebody who's been active as a license holder, LEA specific in another LEA, and I decide then I want to take that teacher on based on my criteria, it's a new request, and I guess ostensibly with a different set of administrators, even that person who became inactive in a particular LEA could be reactivated in that LEA. I mean, if you think about that scenario as well as a possibility over time. So anyway, thank you very much if you'll just take that into consideration.
Can I just, I don't know if I need to come forward to ask, but this is the issue of employment versus termination that we're not sure what you're trying to get at here.
Okay, so that's what we need clarification on. Okay, thank you. Yes?
Can I just make one short comment?
Yes.
Thank you very much for opening this up. This might just be a rules kind of discussion, but I don't know where to go just as a parent about more of a policy issue. And what I'm concerned about is that I've seen my kids go through and get an excellent education in the Utah public school system and particularly in Salt Lake District. And one of the things that's getting me motivated to participate here in this discussion and also discussions on the district level is that I see a disparity between the education my kids have gotten on the east side of Salt Lake in IB, ELP programs and so forth. These are highly competent, highly well-trained, passionate teachers who do really well. And I know that there are wonderful teachers across the district and across the state. But in research I've done and things that I've seen in schools, I see that kids who are maybe disproportionately in classes of, with students of color, poor students, students where there's language issues, where there are parents that don't have post-secondary education. I just worry that having these alternate routes, those teachers will be disproportionately placed in students that have the most need. And that's why I'm so involved, is that I see that there's a disparity between the education some kids get versus other kids get. And I know it's a national trend that there's high levels of teacher turnover because they feel like they're underprepared or undersupported, that they're in schools with high challenges, but also I just worry that a lot of those underprepared teachers are placed in schools with high challenges. So if there's a way to talk about it on a policy level, I'd love to know how to do that, or who to talk to, or how we can make sure that that sort of policy and those trends and the statistics, if we're looking at data, how that could really inform how the rules might be good in and of themselves, but they might disproportionately affect certain populations. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And that concludes our public comment. We'll now move to committee discussion. So any members of the committee have anything that they would like to bring up and discuss? Okay, Board Member Belknap.
Okay, it was stated a couple of times that about the LEA specific license being 3 years and then a renewal, that the renewal was forever. In my ignorance, for some reason, I was thinking that it was a 2-year and they could only get up to a 1-year renewal. Am I wrong in that or right in that?
Would you like me to respond to that?
Oh, the associate.
That was the associate.
Oh, was the associate. Oh, I wrote down LEA, but it was under you.
Can I?
Yes.
Some of the comment was talking about the LEA specific being permanent. It does, but the way that LEA specific works is theoretically, yes, it could be, you could renew it indefinitely. The way the LEA specific is set up, there's the first issuance, then there's the review by the state board at the first renewal, and then from there it would just be the local board that would continue to renew it and request it, at the point when they, because that's the one that they have options to be 1, 2, or 3 years, like they get to choose how long it is. And so they would be the ones in charge of requesting it, after that.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Sorry, I have Word docs, so I can pull up the rule and all the lines for just a second. I'm going to need a second to
Do you want my computer?
Do you need a hard copy?
No.
Do you want me to print you one?
Well, it's right here. It says I'm here, but it won't pull up like the movies.
Then you're not here.
Does anybody else want a hard copy of the bill?
So I have heaps of questions, and there's a couple of things I would like to actually discuss as a committee as we consider this. And I thought it was interesting to hear a lot of concern regarding the LEA specific license today. because when we first started the task force, we weren't even going to go that route. The intent was just to have the associate license and the professional license, and that everyone would go through that route. But then we had a couple new board members come when the board changed on the task force, who insisted that an LEA-specific license was necessary in order to separate hiring. I can't remember the exact concerns that were expressed and why they felt that LEA specific was so important. And so I'm wondering the best way to kind of take into the considerations, because much of the comments today were trying to put more emphasis on standards for the LEA specific, which in my mind, when I think about it, basically equates to the associate bucket and how we describe the associate bucket, right? And so if we were to continue to go that route, then it's basically the same thing as the associate bucket, which is where we were going to initially as a task force. And so, I don't know, Travis, maybe you remember this history a little bit, and so I would be curious if you had some thoughts on.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you my perspective, obviously, as long as with the chair's permission.
Yes,
Sorry.
and then Superintendent Dixon wanted to also.
One comment.
One comment, okay.
Yeah. Travis can give you
Okay.
the technical.
Oh, so you go first.
I just wanted to, Cindy Dixon, State Superintendent, I just wanted to add to that perspective that it wasn't just the board members on the task force, but we held some focus groups, and when we went out to meet with superintendents and HR directors, there was also a request from the superintendents to lead that LEA specific in. We were presenting to them the two buckets, and there were superintendents, especially in rural and remote areas, who talked about the need for an LEA specific. For example, a scenario where in a Daggett district, they have a teacher who's been teaching art there for a number of years, and she doesn't have a bachelor's degree, but is a professional artist. And given the remoteness of the situation, she's apparently a great teacher. Kids love her, producing a lot of art, and has even gotten into performing arts in a very small community. And so that's a scenario that was used to demonstrate why an LEA specific would be necessary, because she wouldn't qualify for the associate moving into profession without a bachelor's, for example. And there were other scenarios that were brought up that would not fit into that associate bucket. So it was for those anomalies, and I think that's an important distinction, that an LEA specific currently, Travis can give you numbers, but there are a number of schools who choose that route, and we've always looked at it as a route where other routes are unattainable or
Untenable or unreasonable.
Untenable or unreasonable, thank you. And we were very strategic using that language so that this was an anomaly, but it's grown in scope over time. So it was more of a request from the superintendents and our board members responding to the field about those issues.
Thank you. Travis?
I think Superintendent Dixon stated that very well. I hit most of the points that I would hit. The only thing I would add is that as the task force started, both at the very beginning and then when it transitioned to new members, the concern is always that we got to our current licensing system because it was piecemeal. It was like, we have a system, here's somebody that falls outside of it, so let's create a new bucket for that person, and then here's somebody outside of that one, so and that's how we end up with 20 licenses. And so ultimately, the idea was, and the intent from my understanding, was that LEA specific were seen as a necessary thing to ensure that we have the flexibility for certain circumstances. But at the same time, the intent was that shouldn't be the norm. Now, how do you enforce, how do you say that it's not the norm? That's a really difficult question. But that was always the intent that I understood from the task force.
It's on top of that.
Okay, Board Member Belknap.
I think it's something we talked about before, and the Dean, Melanie, I didn't get your last name, but she also brought up maybe some sort of percentage of the numbers of licenses given in a district can be LEA specific. So.
Board Member Brittany Cummins.
Is it okay to discuss? I know I
Yes.
don't have a motion at the moment, but I motion to digest the two things. And so we discussed that as well. And can you remind? I apologize.
Why did we not do
captured
that?
all this, and so we did discuss that.
So ultimately, again, this is my understanding. My understanding was that ultimately it was viewed as too restrictive, that it didn't take into account the unique local concept. I mean, 10% of Alpine's teachers is very different than 10% of Weileman's teachers. And so because of that, and the other part of the discussion was, what is the right percentage? Like, it's kind of an, where do you
I
pull
just was
on it?
bringing it up.
Well, can I say
Sorry.
something?
Sorry.
Can I say
I
something?
remember the conversation now.
You could also consider, if you wanted a percentage cap, doing it by either number of students per LEA or kind of like capping it so that it is more like 1 or 2% in Alpine versus 20%.
Or even
Weileman,
have it
or-
as,
I don't
again, that was why the provision to report to the public was made. But there would be nothing that would prevent you from having a requirement that they report that to you. That there be a report to the board of what are the percentages of their teachers, so that you, if you feel like you see a problem, that you can take action.
And we could
Yeah.
fix it.
Here's, take that one.
Okay, did you?
No, he made my trio.
Okay, anyone else?
Well, do you want me to go? Lisa, did you have one? No.
Okay, board member Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to talk about this, give me some help here, maybe Angie, if that's okay, Chair, on terminate versus the revocation piece to talk about. And I actually, this is like a squirrel because it's totally off the topic of that one, but I do like adding Utah effective teachers on line 229 as well. And then 229, or somewhere in there, between 225 and 229. Somewhere in there are.
So remember that for a motion.
Yeah, so I won't forget. I got it there. But can you help me, because I'm not sure that using the term revocation, I think it was Cindy who brought it up, that, really what does that mean then? So if you could give me some guidance so I can work around a motion.
I don't, and I could use some help from the gentleman in the back over here also, brainstorming, because I was thinking about a different word for terminate. And because I think the way that Cindy Phillips described it, where in practicality, if the LEA says even 6 months into granting an LEA specific license, this educator just isn't working out, or you had an instance where you had to say, thank you, but no thank you, we're going to terminate your employment. I'm not quite sure the background about why we were trying to somehow trigger here at our level removing that license from our system, and that I question whether we even need to quote unquote terminate a license, because it is only
LEA.
It is only in effect for that LEA. So that if they left Weileman and wanted to go teach somewhere in Jordan School District or at Summit Academy, they'd have to start the whole process over again. So maybe that would be helpful if Travis gave us some background, because I know that he's probably talked about this and thought about this way more than I have, and together we can brainstorm an idea.
Madam Chair, is it right if I speak?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes.
So I actually have a suggestion, and I would like to know, because the intent of that language, from my understanding from discussion with board members, when we added that in, it was to make it clear that that person, quite frankly, that person doesn't have a property right to that license, that license is only valid in that LEA. So one way to address this issue, particularly the language, would be to say simply that an LEA-specific license expires immediately if the individual leaves employment of the LEA. And then using the word expire, so it's just the license is expired and going from there. Madam Chair, you've got it.
Can we say so moved on that one? Yes.
Well, if it's LEA specific, it doesn't have to terminate. It doesn't have to.
Yeah, you got it.
Oh, here.
If it's LEA specific, then you can only be licensed while working at the LEA.
Right.
If you don't work there, you don't have to terminate it. You don't have to inactivate it. You don't have to do anything else. It's only available if you work there. If you don't work there, then you don't have a license, because the LEA essentially holds the license for you to be able to work for that LEA. If you move to another LEA, you'd have to get that LEA to then issue a license. It isn't transferable. want to make it such, but it would seem to me that it is the responsibility of the LEA to then control the license, and it's not available anyplace else. So it doesn't need to expire, doesn't need to be terminated, doesn't need to be revoked.
It has to expire in counties.
Maybe you could say it this way.
Well, you can know, we can figure out a notation for it, but what it is that it's just, because it's specific to the LEA then controls it.
So, may I ask a question?
Yeah, clarifying question.
From me? Is that?
Yeah,
Keep it.
Okay, so Travis and everyone, what if we deleted lines 328 through 330? And if we felt like, because in some ways Travis and I have been discussing whether we even need those lines to begin with, but maybe insert in lieu of that language something that says an LEA specific license expires immediately if the educator exits employment or the educator's
termination.
Yeah, or educate, and it's not even termination
of the employment
because they could leave.
Well, and the thing that I would say is, quite frankly, the original draft of this rule did not have that language whatsoever. So it's staff's opinion, meaning me, that it would be within my power to expire an LEA-specific license in those circumstances as my interpretation of your rule. I don't think it would have to be there for me to do that. Now, if you want to make that absolutely clear, if you want to make it, then you should put it in there.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be my recommendation.
Travis, can I ask you this? Is this a cactus issue as far as notification is concerned?
No.
Because if it's not a cactus issue, then again, it's like the ticket is held by the LEA. If you're with the LEA, then it works. If you're not, then it doesn't. And so the LEA is the one that holds that. And if the notation is that this is an LEA specific license, then the notation would be
the argument in legal terms would be, again, if a person wanted to make the argument that it is a license and therefore a property right. I mean, that would be the argument. So if that argument doesn't exist, then
no, it doesn't, because the LEA owns the license. And if the LEA owns the license, you don't have a property right. Because what you're doing is you're then working under the license that is then specific to the LEA and the LEA control.
Okay. Yeah, you like that? Okay. Yeah,
okay, Angie? Yes.
So Travis and I are looking at some language, and if the screen was on, I'd log in there so everybody in the audience could look at it. This is group drafting. But the language could be an LEA-specific license expires immediately if the educator's employment with the LEA that requested the license ends. Like it?
Okay. Board Member Cummins?
So I think I'm confused as to whether or not the license is issued by the State Board of Education or the license is issued by the LEA, because that wording assumes that it's requested by an LEA to the State Board of Education, but we keep talking about the property rights being owned by the LEA. So I would just like a little bit of clarification.
So the issue becomes that the rule in other aspects of that language, other lines, it makes it absolutely clear that the board is issuing the license, because as the board, you would have the right to take action based on misconduct, on those kind of things. So it is a license issued by the board. But in terms of the AG's opinion, I think it's just interpreting in a different context, really.
So to clarify, it's a license issued by the board, but it's only able to be used within the LEA once they're terminated or they leave employment and move to another LEA.
Or they resign.
Okay. Board Member Belknap?
Okay, I'll stay on topic, but I have 3 motions.
Okay.
Okay? So
let's do one at a time, if that's okay.
Or I'll just do them all and you, good luck. Okay? I would like to make a motion that we delete lines 225. I just got to make sure. I got to get to it. 225 through 228. Is that right?
That's the associate requirement.
I think you're thinking 3.
I think
323.
Maybe 328.
Where were we?
Yeah, I
So
think it's
lines
With the terminate.
328 through 330.
328 through 330.
Yes.
And replace them with what Angie kind of said.
Okay, and I'll pop it.
That's an official
But
motion.
that we'll let them wordsmith it
No,
correctly,
Okay.
and then we'll is that
Get it
okay?
ready for tomorrow.
Get it
Okay.
ready for tomorrow.
So the motion before us is to strike out lines 328 through 330 and replace it with
And Angie, say kind of what it's going to be.
No, okay.
what
With
Angie is going
a
to
new,
state.
new subsection 6 that would read, an LEA specific license expires immediately if the educator's employment with the LEA that requested the license ends.
Okay. Any discussion to the motion? Okay, seeing no discussion, we will then vote on it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passed unanimously.
Second.
Second motion.
Thank you, Chair. Line 229, somewhere between 225 and 229, that we add in Utah effective teaching standards. And I'm not sure exactly where in there it will fit, but somewhere we add that in there.
Okay, so the motion before us is to add somewhere between 229 and
225 and 229.
229 and 225 and 229. Add in teacher effective standards.
Do you know which one would be best?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
So if I understand the motion correctly, what you're asking is that as part of the requirements for an associate educator license, that these individuals complete some kind of professional learning specifically about the Utah effective teaching standards. Is that what you're saying?
Hold on a minute. Let me reread it.
Board member Brittany Cummins.
So can I kind of go off your thoughts
Yes.
here, Board Member Belknap? So I think, because these lines set the standards for jumping into bucket 1, associate license.
Right.
And so the effective teaching standards, it was intended that in order to show your pedagogical abilities, you would show competency in the professional educator teaching standards. And that was to receive your professional license. And I believe it's already in here because that was the strong intent, was that they would show competency to those standards. Is that correct?
I think that is correct. At the same time, I don't, personally, again, this is my personal opinion, I'm sorry, I wouldn't see the harm of it, of having I could see the value of having them go through a small professional learning module to see the Utah effect. What is expected of a teacher? What do we expect them to do? To have that right up front. And we're not saying demonstrate competency in those standards, but be familiar with them. I mean, that's what I would see it as.
Now I'm debating.
We can come back to it.
Yes.
Michelle, I'm really not sure that it's not bad to have there, but I appreciated, can I just say Brittany, because I have two comments over there.
Yes.
Brittany's comment that really is to go there, but I don't mind the successful completion of a module that shows what it is. It's not that they're showing competency in that, but they complete a module to understand what the steps are. So I actually will keep my motion on the table.
Okay. Any other discussion to the motion? Okay, so, yes.
Sorry. Sarah, I can't remember her last name.
Jones.
Just can't get it when I look at her. She talked about the idea, we are using the word modules. And in the word module, we really did talk about the idea that it was more of an awareness opportunity rather than a course opportunity. And they had talked about using the word course to beef that up a little bit. And so I guess, if we want to talk about these two concepts, if we want to go that route and look at this more as a course rather than a module, then I don't know that I could support this motion, because it would basically be putting those the cart before the horse, where we those teaching standards are expected for them to show competency to receive the professional license. But if it's just an awareness and that they need to know what they're getting into and what those basic routes are, then I agree. But I think it's just as we consider that possible question as well. That if it is truly a module of here's your basic standards that you should be aware of and be aspiring to, then I would support that addition.
Michelle?
Yes, Superintendent Dixon.
If you don't mind, Madam Chair, I'm just, since my name is on these licenses, I'm very nervous and I'm compelled to speak from time to time. So if you prefer that I don't, please tell me.
No, you're more than welcome to speak.
I just want to clarify the word module. So professional learning course, it's a type of professional learning. A module is more unspecified. And so module is actually the more current vernacular rather than course. A course is a very traditional way of thinking about professional learning. That connotes I'm going to either be in brick and mortar or online and taking coursework. It may be passive, it may be active, but a module is a more flexible term that is being used in professional learning literature. And so module is not necessarily specified. It could be something, it could be awareness, but it could also be more intensive. So they're interchangeable, but I just want to be clear that module doesn't necessarily connote awareness, nor does course connote full awareness with competency. So they're interchangeable terms, and we're just starting to see module pop up more because it could be something like a micro-credential, it could be an internship, it could be all sorts of things where a course connotes an actual class. So that's why, I mean, I think I was a proponent of inserting module for that reason, that it's a more flexible term.
Yes.
So over time then, if these modules are created and approved by the superintendent, these modules could change over time. The expectation could change, or either greater expectation or lower expectation. And so I guess
you need to define it.
It's an interesting, it just puts a question mark in my mind. And I apologize for that. I mean, so I agree, and I completely support that somebody going into a classroom should be very aware of those effective teaching standards. That's always been the intent, that is going to be an integral part of the experience of this associate teacher. But how do we ensure that expectation doesn't grow into something that impedes someone showing competency in all of those when that expectation shouldn't be there? Because this associate bucket not only applies to alternate routes, but to teachers in traditional programs who are just beginning their student teaching. And so I think we have to be somewhat careful that we define it clearly so that it doesn't become a problem later on where it's putting barriers for people that are in programs or in whatever alternate route. So.
Board Member Belknap.
I've actually never wanted to change it to courses over modules, okay, because it gives more flexibility. But I would say, I would agree with you on the other, that could happen in all of these. And that's why it's got to be observed and watched carefully. And I don't know if we need to define that more carefully here, or if this definition is good enough that they complete the professional learning module, because the modules will be created.
Yes, Superintendent Dixon.
And I hope we're using the terminology of understanding versus awareness. You know, if you're stepping into that associate bucket and you're in a professional program, and when you step into your student teaching, you don't just have an awareness of the standards, but you understand what they look like, you know what they look like, you've seen what they look like, hopefully, in practice. And so any module, I mean, if I were developing a module, awareness could be as simple as I'm reading the standards. That's not sufficient to step into a classroom. But a module could be developed where I see what they look like in practice, so I have some knowledge and it goes beyond awareness that I understand. You don't fully understand until you're actually doing the work with students in an actual classroom, and that's a deeper understanding. but I would hate to think of awareness as just stopping at being able to read them online and say, I'm aware that they're there, I'm aware of what they are. So maybe that's a middle ground, is understanding versus.
Okay, so I'm trying to remember your motion. I believe it was to insert in between lines 225 and
or just at 229.
And line 229, insert the effective teaching standards described in R277-530.
Right after, yeah.
So that is the motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously.
3.
And your last motion.
Well, I don't know. I might have some more. I'm reading my paper here, okay?
And I can't.
No, you can't read it. Yeah, impossible. Okay, line 246 to 248. And I really appreciated this to have the word consider in here, but Angie, I'm not sure where it should be, but I really appreciated that thought.
Yeah.
That Sarah brought up.
I think change consider to include.
Yeah, I
was
can
that
do
what
that.
it was?
Yeah.
So,
Can I recommend?
No, exactly.
So this would be my recommendation, is that you take Roman numeral 3 and make it like B and move B to C. So it would say, it shall be provided to the superintendent or judge, shall include a formal discussion and observation process, and then consider those last. That's how
You're switching those around.
Yeah, exactly. Switch the order.
That's what it would look like.
Yeah,
So it'll
that
be
makes
A,
sense.
this will be new B, and then insert include. And then this will become C.
So then the consider only applies to the.
Yeah, so I would not be a consider.
No.
I love that. It would be a formal discussion and observation, and then to consider the other two, I and I.
Okay, so that's the motion.
Did we vote on the previous one?
Yes,
Oh,
and it passed. Any discussion to that motion? Do board members need me to restate it? Because I don't know if I could.
I can.
Just go I.
Move line
Okay.
248.
We're going to have Angela Stallings restate the motion for us, and then we'll vote on it.
Yes. And I will actually put it up here momentarily so that you can all see it. But essentially, you're going to be taking what's currently lines 248 and 249 and moving those two lines to right after 244, and that will be a new B. So triple I will become a new B. And say, include a formal discussion and observation process within the first 30 days of employment. Then I'll put and, then we'll have consider the way it is. So I'll put it up right now, but I've got it.
So any further discussion to that motion?
So we're not, if I may.
Yes.
We're not going to use the include, so
yes,
it will be an option, not a.
We are going to use the include. It will be.
It's right here. I'm moving it right now.
She's typing it up.
She's typing it up.
So we're good.
Give me 1 sec.
Come on, Angie.
I'm getting there.
It'll make tomorrow go a lot.
Sorry, I'm getting there.
No pressure.
I know.
No problem.
And it's actually an I. This is why I don't like to draft in Word.
Because it auto-formats.
Yes. There we go. Previous experience. Begrudgingly. Okay. Sorry. And that went and does stay right, because isn't there something after C?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or, that would need to be a.
Is a period.
No and there. Yeah,
Okay, so it's just a period, and this is and. And that's an and right here. It's a lot of ands. I'll take that other end off. All right, there you go. So that's what it would look like.
Okay.
Chair?
Yes.
On C, then we're still going to use consider. We're not going to use include. We are.
Right. Include was moved
Just
to B.
Oh, okay, so they're both there. They're both
Yeah.
being
Yeah,
used.
so my understanding was that include would be the formal observation process, and then basically directing the LEA to consider those two other things. That was my understanding.
Are they able to consider both? Or is it
absolutely.
either or?
Yeah, they
Okay.
yes.
And an or.
Is it and or it just says and?
And or
Oh,
and
okay, but
means
they
and.
can. Okay. Okay.
They're considering.
Consider,
It's not required.
Sure.
Yes.
Could they consider not to use either one of those?
If
Right,
they chose
because they're
to.
not required.
Okay.
Because consider doesn't tell them what to do with it. They
Right,
just have to
just
consider.
considering it. It actually does say shall, but it's considering. You're right. It doesn't.
Yes. Okay. Any other discussion to the motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Yes.
I
Sydney?
just want to bring awareness to, going back to the line on terminate for LEA. I believe that language shows up in line 387 and 388 as well, so just make sure that you're capturing both. 387, it says criteria and procedures to be employed if the LEA requests early termination of the LEA specific license.
Probably just strike those lines.
We'll need to fix
Do you want to make
that.
a motion for that?
So I make a motion to
yes.
strike those lines.
Yeah, so just strike lines 387 and 388.
Yeah.
Okay, so the motion is to strike lines
Well, I can't make
380.
the motion.
I did.
She did.
She did.
Okay, sorry.
So the motion before us is to strike lines 387 to 388. Any discussion to that? Okay, seeing no discussion, we will vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passed unanimously.
Good catch.
Anything else? Yes.
I'd like to go back to lines 227 to 29-ish, where it's talking about the requirements for the associate license. If I'm in the right spot.
Where are we again?
228 and 27. We'll just back talk about the modules. So one of the members of the public spoke about the concern with basic special education law, and I just wanted to clarify my understanding on this, that this is just, it would be similar to what any regular education teacher, this isn't the same thing as full special education qualification. This is just understanding of special education in a everyday classroom setting.
So, again, to my understanding, the board member's intent on that language was that when originally it just said special education, that's an incredibly broad topic, and when the board was looking at what does that language mean, what are we trying to get there, my understanding is that we were trying to focus in on the basics, the fact that an IEP is not optional. They need to know that. Some of those basic special education law things. It was not talking about, quite frankly, that you're not showing that you're an effective teacher with special education students yet. That's not what that means. But that was my understanding of the intent.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
And IDEA for our teachers of record for our students with disabilities have very different requirements. So they couldn't come in and be on an LEA specific and just have a basic level course. So IDEA governs special education teachers very differently, and they have to be prepared and qualified in order to meet IDEA requirements.
Right. Okay. Yes.
A related question. There was conversation about English language learners, and what are some of the requirements currently? So if a candidate is coming through a traditional program, I know we didn't discuss it when I went through a program, but what currently is that part of a traditional program where those teachers coming through traditionally will gain understanding, not an awareness, of how to respond to ELL students in the classroom?
Chair, if I may.
Yes.
It's in two places. First of all, programs have specific requirements in R277-504, which requires that they prepare teachers to work with a diverse population with English language, with special ed. So it's a requirement of programs in that particular instance. The other place it would be found would be in the effective teaching standards. The effective teaching standards do talk about being able to differentiate instruction, to work with diverse populations and ELL students. Those would be the two places that they currently would fall.
Yeah. So our inclusion of the effective teaching standards in that area would require that these candidates into the associate license would have some understanding.
Yeah, they may not have the mastery of the skills, but they would understand what ELL means.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Yes, board member Cummins.
I can't find exactly where it is, but as we have talked about reporting of the percentage of LEA-specific licenses to the State Board of Education, is that? I'm guessing that would be somewhere
hold on,
364, 380, 364.
Talks 364, 366 talks
Oh,
about
there's
specific license.
That talks about
it's
mentoring.
389.
Yeah.
And so right now the requirement is that they post it on their website.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think would be the most, just curious, if we were to add a requirement to report those percentages to the board on an annual basis, where would that best be served?
The end.
Would it be the end, or would you, because you could say, shall report annually to the board and prominently post the following.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
you could
do
kind of
that.
combine it so it's both things. That's one way to do it. I don't think that's the only way to do it.
So,
that's a good
Would we
point.
already have that?
Would we?
Yeah, we would.
okay,
So maybe it could be just a requirement that the superintendent shall report that annually
to the board.
to the board. Yeah, because we would have that. So if that was the case, then
Just doing.
down in, oh wow,
Double fines here.
Oh, okay.
we probably need to find a better place to put that. If you'd like us to prepare something for tomorrow, we'll see what we can figure
But we
out.
could do that and get that ready for
So on
tomorrow.
line 383, request that at least shall adopt a policy and that can report it under that.
So this would be a, sorry.
Yes.
So we're looking now, instead of requiring it of an LEA, that we have that information through Cactus, and so we're now requiring the superintendent
To do a report.
And so we'll fit under these lines.
Yeah.
Right.
That's their responsibilities.
We'll find.
I do.
Yes.
In the olden days, whatever that was, we used to actually report to the board. We had an annual teacher report that we,
It was the legislature, actually.
well, it was the legislative report, but
And we would
before
do it,
we
yeah.
reported to them, we reported here. The legislature no longer requires that annual report, but that's something that certainly,
We could do it.
if you wanted to include that there would be an annual report on teacher licensure
We could do that.
to the board, I mean, because we really need to talk about.
Because it could be in more general
We
terms.
need to talk about equitable distribution. Tell me your name, I'm so.
Deirdre Straight.
Mrs. Straight, if, to her point, that's something that we have to report now by school to the federal government for purposes of equitable distribution under Title II. I mean, there are a lot of reporting features that we're doing piecemeal, so I would suggest or recommend perhaps that the board hears an annual report on licensure that would include equitable distribution, etc.
Okay. Do we need a motion for that, or is that
We can prepare that and you can
Okay.
propose it in the meeting tomorrow.
great? Thank you.
Yep, just I did it at 10. Just
Are you going to try and get it ready?
Well,
now?
No, we'll have it for tomorrow.
I'm starting it, but I
Well-
think it might take too long.
So
but
you'll
we'll
have it
do a
tomorrow?
new section. Do you want me? Can I say something?
Yes.
So I think if you'd like to make a motion or have something to vote on, it is to direct staff to create a new section 10 of the rule entitled Superintendent Annual Report to the Board and ask staff to come up with some language for that annual report. And then that'll make the new the effective date section will now become section 11. And we'll get that ready.
Okay, so I need a motion. Let me just say so moved.
Lisa's got it.
So, Chair Bolter, if I could propose a motion to require staff to put together language that would require that the superintendent produce a annual report on the equitable distribution of teacher licensing. Did I say that correctly?
Just licensing.
Licensing.
Licensing. And include equitable.
Yeah, right.
And create a new section, right?
Yeah.
A new section 10.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We got it.
Okay, perfect. So, any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passed unanimously. I knew you couldn't stop at 3. Go for it.
Okay. On line 324. I just can't get there. I thought this was very interesting. The first renewal of the LEA specific educator license area or endorsement shall be approved by the board. So that doesn't give us any way not to approve it.
I've made this mistake before, and it's my fault.
Okay, so what should we...
May be approved?
What we did before was shall be approved or denied by the board is how we fixed it in other places.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's my fault.
That's my motion.
Okay, so
Too bad, or denied.
on line 325 to say shall be approved or denied. Add or denied.
Thank you.
Okay, any discussion to that motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passed unanimously. Yes, Board Member Brittany Cummins.
Sorry, I'm terrible at navigating my way through rules on a quick basis, but we had Nick Hansen, I believe, from Jordan District talk about kind of that the example of a K-3 teacher, et cetera, and I believe we tried to address that. Is that correct in this rule? And that's where we talk about they can be an associate teacher for that particular content, or
Correct. The idea being that things like SAEPs, adding new license areas, essentially is the adding of an associate license area or an associate endorsement, and then working to meet the requirements for professional, whatever that looks like. Yeah.
okay, thank you. Where is that? Sorry.
Well, it would be under the general structure of the license, which is one of the very first sections, where it talks about that license area on line 170, where it says license areas of concentration and endorsements shall have those designations.
Thank you.
Board Member Belknap.
So just for clarity, they could be holding a professional and an associate at the same time.
They could hold a professional or associate license area.
Yes.
Professional or associate endorsement, yes, but a license, they only have one.
One, so it'd be professional and then the endorsement would be. Thank you.
Any other discussion to this rule?
So at this point, I want to get a motion.
Board Member Brittany.
I move that we approve R277501.
Draft 4 with the
Draft
amendments.
4 with the amendments.
Which will be draft 5 tomorrow.
And move it forward for on first reading and move it forward to the board for approval.
Second is final.
Second and final reading.
Okay, so the motion before us is to approve R277-501, draft 4 with the amendments, and move it to on first reading and move it to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Clarity, we probably need to say, and it will be draft 5 tomorrow.
Right, for draft 5. Any discussion to that motion? Board Member Cummins?
I just want to share some thoughts, if that's okay. Because this has been a fascinating process that has taken several years, and and I appreciated Heidi Matthews and her question of vision. And we really, this has been an amazing opportunity to really look at a scattered mess of licensing and say, what is our vision? And the vision never was, let's get more teachers in classrooms. It was never meant, at least from my understanding in our initial conversations, it was never, let's solve the teacher shortage. But let's look at all these scattered things. And there was many, I mean, there were questions with APT, there were questions with the current ARL system, and all of those alternate routes that have always been there and were actually required by law that we have an alternate path to licensing. And so it was, how do we bump up the standard? How do we recognize, and I was able to attend part of some of the discussions with the NTEP, which is the Network for Transforming Educator Preparation Programs, and it was fascinating to see that their goal was really to have a student-ready teacher in the classroom, and that really was the vision that I saw as we took this, that how do we increase the standards for all of these routes to licensing and ensure that the standards are put more closely together, that those teachers do have to show competency in education in order to receive a professional license, and not just jump through hoops or show that I checked off these boxes, but they have to show that they are competent in a school to receive that professional license. And so I appreciated the comments and all of the input that's provided into this as we try to bring it all together into a compact, and I know it's not perfect, but a compact, cleaner system that ensures that those standards are met for the students and for educators who have a desire and the ability to be a teacher in a classroom. So I just wanted to share my gratitude for all the many hours and the people that have put input into this process.
Hear, hear.
I second that. Yes.
You're about done then, right?
Here we are then.
Yeah, I just want to thank Madam Sheriff Bolter for having this meeting on a kind of short notice, and for the committee members and their way you've addressed, and also those that have come and spoke. I think these are really good betterments that will be brought forth to the full board. So thank you for your attention to the details and trying to make this better than what it was. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I hate to follow Chair Huntsman's last word, but as your state superintendent, I just want to express publicly that I'm actually really excited about the way moving forward. I have been frustrated, as has Travis, having been in his seat before, of the myriad of ways that we try to accommodate teachers, and we would never assume that every student in our classroom should be taught the same way. Why do we assume that we should prepare and support every teacher the same way? We've always jokingly said that every teacher is on an IEP in some regards when it comes to licensure and support, but teachers have very individual needs, just as our students do. And I think this provides an opportunity for us to move forward in a way that we get more creative and more supportive, so that we can retain and recruit the most effective teachers possible for our students. In the associate space, what I'm so appreciative is that we have 10 preparation programs. We're lucky that they do a great job in our state. We're not like other states that are closing down programs, or they have 40 programs or 50 that have minimal effectiveness in some of their programs. We have 10 really great teacher education programs, and to honor their candidates as they come out of the classroom, we consider them professional educators prepared in every way to be student ready. In that associate space, we then have a space where we're saying people are preparing to be able to show mastery. So you're either student teaching, or if you're a career changer, or somebody wanting to teach, for whatever reason, we do have universities and other partners who are getting creative and collaborative in ways that they can support people in that space. And so I appreciate it. I think it was Sarah who said, could you add in the piece of resources as well? Not just what, but where they're going to get those resources. I don't know if we missed that.
We did.
We did.
I didn't miss it.
We didn't?
I didn't miss it. I didn't.
Okay.
Put it in.
Well, but even if it's not in the rule, I think it's an expectation that that our LEAs who employ teachers in the associate space should really be providing that, and we should lead out on what that might look like and how we can support that work as well. So I think it's an exciting time to collaborate in different ways, and I've had universities express to me their excitement about being able to step into the associate space and differentiate some support for educators. So I think it's a great time, and I really appreciate those who have weighed in and given us multiple perspectives. And I think we need to look at this as an opportunity as well. There will be challenges with opportunities.
Number 5.
Yes, Board Member Belknap.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, wait, we still have a motion on the table.
We do?
Yes.
To adopt.
To adopt
no, I
the
don't
rule.
want to do that.
Draft 5 on
Draft 5.
first reading.
We haven't voted yet.
Oh, we haven't voted? Okay, then we can't
Nope.
adjourn.
No, we can't. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passed unanimously. Now you.
5. Motion to adjourn.
Okay, meeting is adjourned.